So out of these 25 cases, I will mention 18 of them, not in detail. So 7 of which the violation were handed down to Zhongtian's political talk shows. So here, I guess, even though this is a news station, but you can, excuse me, you can argue the case that, commentators or pundits or experts are offering their political opinions. 11 cases are cited for overly dramatic coverage of a particular politician. And this politician often is what terrorists said in the beginning of our seminar, Han Guoyu, who is a pro-China politician in Taiwan. Some might argue that he's pro-CCP, even though I argue that's not the case. In these cases, all of which, if you read through the details, many audiences in Taiwan or citizens will feel the political ramification of this. I will first argue the case that even though national security shouldn't take part of our conversation here, if national security is an issue at hand, different set of legal action should be taken rather than actions against the news agency's license being revoked, or not, in this case, not being revoked, just not being renewed. So many Taiwanese enjoy Zhongtian's news reporting. Actually, during the period of 2018 and 2019, it is actually the most watched news station in Taiwan. So I will further argue the case that Zhongtian is not a pro-CCP agent, CCP, Chinese Communist agent. It is just within Taiwan, a pro-China and pro-prostrate peaceful solution station, which shouldn't be taking actions against politically. So though I think this whole case is not politically motivated, but the discussion, the civic discussion has led to that discourse. So many people might even argue the case that if you watch other news stations in Taiwan, some of the phenomena, even I feel concerning from Zhongtian, is also happening. And it's very easy to go down the road for people to say, in already diverse political society, to say there is a double standard here. Even though I'm arguing that NCC shouldn't not renew or revoke any news station, and I think that's the bulk of my argument that Zhongtian situation is bad for Taiwan society. There isn't any concrete evidence that I have seen yet that Beijing has news editorial, and therefore I think there is not a reason for NCC to reject its license renewal. So very briefly, I'll recap my entire argument is that for the interest of democratic interest and for the evidence we have seen from NCC and the evidence we have seen from the Beijing's interference, all fail to meet the standard of the action and the result we see here. And I will rest the rest of my time, and I welcome an open discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you all for those very lucid and informative remarks. I'd like to go ahead and turn now to kind of an open discussion. And the first question I want to pose to the group, if I can find it here. I'm struck by Cedric's comment that there's a clear distinction between news reporting and opinion. And in Taiwan, these lines are constantly blurred. You'll have a news report on a television station followed by a talk show, and the same people are sometimes involved in both. And so I'd like to invite the three panelists to perhaps reflect on how we can distinguish between reporting that is strictly news, in which there's no kind of partisan slant, or there's no kind of bias, or at least we can enforce a neutral, nonpartisan approach to news reporting, and opinion, where we want to see different points of political view. We want to see a robust debate among different voices. And so can we make this distinction, and can we ask a government body actually to enforce that in a way that's actually practical? And so this is a question I think that Cedric probably should tackle first, and then we'll go in order again.
Thank you. Yes, there's some points mentioned by Eric Huang on which I totally agree. There's others for which I quite disagree. Right, we are not talking about freedom of opinions, we're talking about news, meaning facts. And the problem is that not even mentioning about Beijing's interference, which Eric is right, can very hardly be proven, but the owner of the TV channel CTI, Tsai Ing-wen, has been caught
Oh dear. Looks like we've lost our speaker here. Cedric, can you hear me? If not, I'm gonna, oh,
yeah, we're talking
you just
about,
froze. Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, we're not talking about political biases. We're talking about deliberate lies. And this is very dangerous for democracy. The very purpose of a regulator is to make sure that news channels are imparting news contents, meaning factual contents, maybe comments, but not facts that do not exist. And it's not because, and it's true, the media in Taiwan, most of them do not work fully ethical. It's not because everyone violates the rules, so no one should be sanctioned. It doesn't work like this. CTI may be the first one, but it would be good actually for the Taiwanese democracy that other channels of other with other political tendencies would also be sanctioned for the same thing. And we are calling on Ncc to apply the same standards to all channels. Information in Taiwan has become some kind of a mix between entertainment and circus games. This is not tolerable in a democracy. The news should be a tool for the public to better participate in democracy, and it's normal that a regulatory body would enforce it. And my last point, it is very important, and we're calling on the government to reinforce the guarantees of independence of Ncc, just like they should do for public broadcasters, because of course, you mentioned it, Karine, in the beginning of our discussion, as long as there will be doubt on the independence of Ncc members, there will be doubt on Ncc decisions, and it will be also bad for the Taiwanese democracy in general. So all this is in the past two open letters published by Reporters Without Borders. First one was published before the presidential election at the end of 2089. And the second one was published last year in May, and we were calling on President Tsai to act on these matters. Guarantees of independence of Ncc and the public broadcasters are fundamental.
Okay, so if I understand you right, Cedric, you're calling for a much more robust media regulator in Taiwan, which would be a distinct shift from the traditional practices in Taiwan.
Yeah.
Junling,
every sector is regulated. Why not? Why the media should be the only sector that is not regulated and that is outside of democratic control? This makes no sense in a democracy.
Okay, Junling, since you have experience working as part of that media regulator, do you think that's practicable?
Thank you. I think the Ncc actually, the law enforcement is exactly follow the law, and I don't agree with what Eric just said as a double standards, because by the Satellite Broadcasting TV Act, the Ncc can only enforce financial penalty whenever the news channel they didn't really verify the truth, of news stories before broadcasting it. So there's nothing relevant to, the opinions or the viewpoint, which pro-China or against China. So that's not the issue and the rationale for the NCC to, sanction on CCTV or other news channels. So I have to make this point very clearly. And Eric just mentioned that the penalties happened in the past 2 years, around the year 2018 and 2020. But there's one missing point, because the amendment of the TV Act, which was passed by the Congress of Taiwan in year 2015. And the NCC started to, enforce the law requirement around the, year 2018. So that's the real situation. So you cannot argue that why, before year 2016 or 2015, there's no any case in Taiwan about, to punish the news channel for, their ignorance of verifying the truth. So that's the, law amendment in Taiwan. So we have to make this point very clearly to the audience. So let's back to the point of the law requirement. And maybe I want to jump, out of the box of the situation and the political tension inside Taiwan. From the comparative policy viewpoint, I have to say that the NCC in Taiwan, we quite followed the FCC model in the United States, but our law enforcement and the requirement are more similar to the European model. For example, I want to put the UK's case on the text. The regulator Ofcom in the UK, they frequently, punish the news channels on the issues such as, impartiality, fairness, and accuracy, this kind of issues. There are two major cases in the last year. One is Russia Today. Yeah, the Ofcom started the investigation of some news program of Russia Today, especially on the spy issue, and the result of the investigation is that they find the Russia Today violate Ofcom's Broadcasting Act on impartiality and accuracy. And the second case is about the CGTN. I think most of the audience here know what CGTN is. The former, is the CCTV. So the major case here is that the CGTN's news story and the coverage on Hong Kong protest is found by the Ofcom, violating the Broadcasting Act. So the Ofcom find these two, news televisions, and eventually Ofcom revoked CGTN's TV license after, the investigation immediately, not, after certain terms of license renewal. So that's the regulation system in the UK. So if we look into this kind of media regulation from the global, world. So we cannot deny that, the UK is a democratic country, and we cannot argue that it violates or invasion of press freedom here.
Okay, so we've got, it sounds like 2 votes then for a more robust and active media regulator in Taiwan, and one that is going to enforce, ideally would enforce more directly and consistently some professional nonpartisan journalistic standards. Eric, do you think that's possible? And is there a way in your mind to distinguish between opinion news or editorial and actual news where they're just broadcasting the facts?
CDI TV here. And just to clarify, I wasn't arguing there is a double standard. I'm saying that perception, the public perception, perceived as a double standard. I wasn't arguing their way. So let me offer my thoughts on your question, Curtis. I think that given today's fast information technology era, I think it's very hard for people to not receive misinformation in our daily lives. So the question, to address this question, we really have to look at 2 issues. One issue is whether NCC has the authority to oversee a news channel using a public platform. The second is, does the government has the authority to shut down a self-media, say what Zhongtian does today, which is on YouTube, right? The latter, in my opinion, is easier to answer, is no, I don't think the government will have that authority. The former is more tricky. And for a person like me coming from a political background, I'm simply pointing out the fact that even when we are discussing a journalistic ethic issues, we still have to face the reality of public perception. And that's often very tricky and something that's very important to mend and move a society forward, especially given the rise of political populism and the divisiveness of Taiwan's politics, even though I think we might be a little better than the US in that front, but that's just my opinion. This Zhongtian case, what this Zhongtian case proved to us is if this Zhongtian case can help other Taiwanese news media using a public platform to become more A, objective, and B, more journalistically ethical, and I think is the good direction. But I'm still pointing out the fact that there are, in between the times of the next NCC review of news stations, there are a lot of unanswered questions remain in the public discourse. And I think this is actually bad for society and democracy.
Okay, great. So in the interest of time, I want to move on to another question. And I'll just make the observation that in Taiwan, the NCC has jurisdiction over broadcast media, so television and radio, but it does not have jurisdiction over print media, as I understand it, and it does not have jurisdiction over the internet, right, or social media companies, which in fact are private companies that regulate themselves. And so in the United States, we've run into this problem where the social media companies are struggling to figure out how to police unethical behavior on their platforms and to define a kind of ethical standard. And so the question I'd pose to all of our panelists is there something special about TV that necessitates or justifies a more kind of aggressive or robust regulatory presence that is not so crucial or important in the print media sphere or online in the internet? And if you think there's not a difference, then would you advocate then for Taiwan to create some kind of regulatory body that also regulates print and internet media? So we'll start with Cedric.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Well, the TV is very important because it's likely to be the media that has the most impact and the most immediate impact on the largest number of members of the public. But I believe that these regulatory questions actually come from technical facts, because in the past there were a very limited number of channels, and these channels had to be attributed, and there were a lot of technical questions. So there is a history between the fact that the TV would be regulated another way compared to internet or to the print media. Nowadays, there is no more difference of nature between the media. And of course, there should be a unified regulation, because the same company might operate TV channel over the web, radio channel over the web, print media over the web. So of course, there should be one single and unified regulation. This leads to a wider question. After the cyberspace got opened, democracies are not in control anymore. Democracies have a hard time to protect themselves against propaganda, against authoritarian regimes that somehow invade this cyberspace, because regulations most of the times are outdated. And this is not a threat that only Taiwan is facing, but every democracy is facing this threat. And Reporters Without Borders has been repeatedly calling on democracies to sharpen their tools, improve the tools to protect themselves against such attacks. So in the case of Taiwan, yes, there should be a unified regulation, not to control the media, the print media, the TV, the internet, but to ensure that there is a fair rule of the game that benefits to the public.
Okay, I'm going to go to our next two panelists, but I do want to raise a related issue here, and that is in the print media sphere and in the online sphere. In Taiwan, in practice, the enforcement of ethics is basically through the defamation and libel laws. So different media companies will sue reporters, and reporters then face a lawsuit for some of their reporting, even if they can demonstrate that that reporting was in fact factual. And I bring this up in part because this is directly related to the CTI TV case. There was a reporter in the summer of 2019, Catherine Hill, who wrote an article for Financial Times, getting several people, anonymous sources, but several anonymous sources to conclude that CTI TV and the larger China Times Want group were coordinating their coverage with the Taiwan Affairs Office in Beijing. And that ran then in the Financial Times, and Want Group then turned around and sued the reporter, Catherine Hill. I mention this in part because I wanted to have Catherine here as part of this conversation. And at the time I reached out to her, she was still under that lawsuit and could not speak publicly about it. That, to me, is a very concerning case. And it suggests that reporters in Taiwan do not actually have complete freedom to report, even when they stand by their reporting. This threat hangs over them. And so is there another way? Do Taiwan's libel laws need to change as well in order to preserve media freedom in Taiwan? So Junling, you're an expert on journalism in Taiwan. What do you think of this case?
Okay, thank you for mentioning this case. Yeah, talking about the libel law. Yeah, currently in Taiwan, yeah, we still have, the libel punishment by the criminal law. So that's the current situation, and it's continued debate in Taiwan here, especially the Journalist Association and the media reform organizations quite propose this issue. And yeah, I think that's one thing we should to think and act more, carefully in Taiwan here. And talking about the difference of regulation for print media, broadcasting media, and even the internet, I think the international trend of regulation is kind of changing nowadays, especially for the internet. So it happens in the United States, in the European countries. For example, the EU, they have the AVNSD, that's Audio-Video Media Service Directive. It already, includes the online services, and to put the same regulation, standard for broadcasting media and online media, even, including social media, but not the print media. So yeah, I think that's the global challenges for especially, the media regulator and the democratic country, in regulation, the media outlets. But
Oh dear. All right. Let's see. All right, I see Eric.
No, my apologies. I got disconnected.
Yeah, I did too. I think we all did.
I'm back. I was disconnected too. Yes.
Yeah, I think we all hit the same bump in the internet tubes or whatever. All right, sorry about that. Let's return to Junling. You were making a point about the Media Service Directive in the EU and more generally kind of trends in international trends in media regulation.
that's right. So yeah, my point here, that's the challenge, globally for every democratic country to deal with, the such as misinformation or disinformation online.
Right.
And of course, that's the current, efforts for Taiwanese government and for the civil society in Taiwan. Yeah, I just working on, the report about the combating misinformation in Taiwan. And I found it's, the key here is cross-sector cooperation among different, the government, the media industry, the online platform, and the civil society, and even including fact-check organizations. So yeah, and currently, Taiwan stands well, because we have a small presidential election in year 2020, and we are doing very well on the pandemic of COVID-19. So we hope that, yeah, we need more efforts and more communications with the civil society, not only the decision, and policy made by the government.
Right, right. So there is an important role for civil society to play, and potentially a journalistic group as well that would self-police. In many countries, journalists themselves go through a kind of professionalization or training. They censor each other or censure, each other if they engage in malpractice. And so there's a fair amount of civil society work that could be done to improve Taiwan's media environment as well. Eric, I want to hear from you about the possibility of I noticed you were nodding along when we were talking about libel laws in Taiwan and concern about that. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, for the interest of time, I'll keep my answer very short. I think since I'm arguing that for media freedom, I think we should get rid of these libel laws against individual journalists, and second, we should just apply the same regulations across board for all medias and news agencies, whether it's broadcasting, newspaper, or in the internet.
Okay.
I'm in favor of less regulations versus strict regulations. But like Cedric and Professor Holmes said, the world is facing a new phenomenon and people are still figuring out what to do. So for that, I will also listen to experts like them for their discussions to see what's the best way forward.
Okay. So I want to kind of close our discussion here with a thought about the commercial motive in media in Taiwan, but elsewhere as well. In the United States, we've seen a dramatic decline in the quality and the kind of robustness of local news reporting because much of their ad revenue has been stripped away by the large social media companies. In Taiwan, profit margins at most of the media companies are extremely thin, as I understand it. And so there's a rush to put out product cheaply and quickly. So one proposal that's been floating around for 20 or 25 years in Taiwan is to create a more robust public broadcasting system. So there is a public broadcasting station. I don't know how many people actually watch it these days, but is there do you think that might help improve the overall media sphere in Taiwan if you had a more robust public television and public radio, and perhaps even some public print media and online media? Is there a strong rationale for building this up, investing some resources in it? Cedric, your thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. This is one request by Reporters Without Borders, that the Taiwanese government would drastically increase the funding of the public media. Let's make it clear, public media does not mean state media. State media in an authoritarian country is a media that answers to the state, that carries the propaganda of the state. When we're talking about public media, we're talking about media that belong to the public, meaning that are not submitted to the imperative of making profit for shareholders, so that can make a better public service for the information of citizens. We should actually call them public service media. That would be more clear. So in Taiwan, the public service media are extremely underfunded. The budget of the public television service, for example, is only a fraction of its South Korean counterpart. I think it represents something like 6%, if I have a good memory, of the South Korean TV budget. So even if you consider the difference of population, PTS is extremely underfunded. And of course, the purpose of a strong public TV system is to set standards. You cannot expect private companies which purpose is to make profit to set ethical standards if they do not have competition. So this is very important that Taiwan would strengthen its public TV sector. It should be the reference. It should be the public TV should be the TV the public refers to in case of doubt on contents being published. And for this, not only public TV service needs more money. I'm talking about PTS, but I could talk about the press agency. I could talk about the public radio and so on. Not only they need more money, but they also need better guarantees of independence. Because of course, as long as there will be a suspicion that government is able in any way to have control on their editorial line, the public trust in these media will not improve. So more money and more guarantees of independence, this is capital for the future of the Taiwanese democracy.
Okay. Junling, your thoughts on this? We'll give you about a minute and a half since we're running short on time.
Okay, thank you very much. Of course, I support the public media system, especially we have a very, very strong public television station here, and the annual budget is 900 million Taiwanese dollar. It's just about 30 million US dollars. That's really small money. And without, the full support from the public, we cannot have sound TV system here, and to put a good model for the commercial media. So of course,
Okay.
thank you very much.
All right, Eric, some last words, last thoughts?
Sure, I'm in favor of a stronger public supported news outlet, but I think that cannot be in substitution for more commercial driven news media. That is to argue the case that's why public news outlets are even more important and needed. I think there will always be different opinions, and there will be news stations that share different views.
Okay. Great. Well, we have like 30 seconds left in this event, so I just want to extend a warm thanks to our three panelists for getting up early Taipei time to join us today for this conversation. As you can see, we've got a lot of issues that we just began to scratch the surface of, and I hope we can continue this conversation in person sometime soon when we can travel again and get together in Taiwan. But it's been a pleasure to have you on. Just to remind our viewing audience, I'm Karis Templeman. I'm the program manager of the project on Taiwan in the Indo-Pacific region at the Hoover Institution. And this has been Defending Media Freedom in Taiwan. Thanks. Have a good morning, good rest of the day, good night, wherever you may be, and stay safe out there.
Thank you, Karis.
Thank you.
Thank you, and
Thank you.
bye.
Thanks very much. This was great, guys. Wonderful.